When my son told me to leave, I didn't cry. I remember standing by the doorway, holding my small suitcase, while the evening sun poured through the curtains. It painted everything in gold, as if trying to make that painful moment look beautiful. But nothing could make it beautiful. He didn't look at me. He couldn't. His voice was trembling, though he tried to sound firm. "Mom, maybe it's better if you stay with Aunt Rose for a while. Emily thinks we all need some space." Emily, his wife. The woman I had welcomed into my home with open arms. The woman I had prayed for, long before she even existed in his life. I used to tell my friends, I just hope my son finds someone who loves him as much as I do. And he did. At least, that's what I believed at first. When I left that day, I smiled instead of crying. I didn't want him to feel guilty. I didn't want to be a burden. I whispered, "Take care of yourself, son," and stepped out. The air outside felt heavy, but I told myself it was only for a few days. I didn't know that a few days would turn into months. My name is Margaret. I'm 61 years old. I've lived in the same little house for over 3 decades. The one my late husband, Peter, built with his own hands. Every corner of that house has a story. The old rocking chair by the window still creaks the same way it did when my son, Daniel, was a baby, and I'd rock him to sleep. After Peter passed away, Daniel became my reason to wake up every morning. He was my only child, my laughter, my prayer, my purpose. We didn't have much, but we had each other. And that was enough. I worked as a school librarian for most of my life. Books were my companions. They taught me about patience, love, and forgiveness, lessons I would need much later in life, though I didn't know it back then. Daniel was always a quiet boy. Thoughtful, gentle, with eyes that could melt any mother's heart. When he was in high school, he'd still hug me before leaving for class. Sometimes his friends teased him for it, but he never stopped. "You're my mom," he'd say. "Why would I stop hugging you?" He promised me once, when he was about 12, "Mom, when I grow up, I'll buy you a big house with a garden full of roses." I remember laughing, touching his hair, and saying, "I don't need a big house, sweetheart. Just promise you'll never forget me." He looked at me seriously and said, "Never." Years passed quickly. He graduated college, got a job in the city, and started living on his own. I missed him terribly at first, but I told myself this is what good mothers do, they let their children fly. He'd visit every weekend. We'd have tea together, talk about his work, and sometimes just sit in silence, watching the sunset. Those moments felt like small gifts. I collected them quietly, like a child gathering seashells. Then one day, he told me he had met someone. Her name was Emily. He spoke of her with that glowing excitement people have when they're in love. "Mom, she's kind. You'll love her," he said. And I wanted to. I really did. When I first met Emily, she was polite and gentle, though a little distant. I thought it was just nerves. Not everyone opens up easily. I welcomed her warmly, cooked her favorite meals, and told her she was part of the family. When they got married, I stood in the front row with tears in my eyes, not because I was sad, but because I was proud. My son had found happiness. That's all a mother ever wants. After the wedding, Daniel asked me to move in with them, just for a while, until I felt comfortable being alone in the old house. He didn't want me to feel lonely. I was touched by his concern, even though I knew newlyweds need their space. But he insisted, and I agreed. At first, everything was fine. Emily and I shared polite conversations over morning coffee. I tried to stay out of their way, keeping to my room or tending the garden. I made dinner sometimes, and she would thank me with a soft smile. But over time, I started feeling something shift, something quiet and cold. It was in the way she'd sigh when I entered the kitchen. In the way Daniel would glance at her before answering me. In the way the house, once filled with laughter, started feeling like a place I was visiting, not a place I belonged. I told myself I was imagining it. That I just needed to adjust. But one evening, I overheard something that made my heart stop. I was in my room, folding laundry, when I heard Emily's voice through the thin wall. She wasn't yelling, just speaking in a low, tired tone. "Daniel, I can't keep doing this. I feel like we have no space to breathe. Your mom is everywhere. I know she means well, but I can't live like this forever." Silence. Then Daniel's voice, hesitant. "She's my mother, Em. She doesn't have anyone else." "I understand," Emily replied softly, "but she's had you all to herself for 30 years. Isn't it time we start our own life?" Her words echoed in my head long after their conversation ended. She's had you all to herself for 30 years. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the photo of Daniel as a little boy, missing front teeth, bright eyes, arms wrapped around my neck. I whispered, "You were never mine to keep forever, were you?" The next morning, I decided to give them space, not because Emily asked for it, but because I loved my son enough to let him go. When I told Daniel, he looked shocked. "Mom, you don't have to." I smiled and interrupted, "It's okay, dear. I've been thinking the same thing. You both need your time together. I'll visit sometimes, all right?" He hesitated. Maybe a part of him wanted me to stay. But another part, the one that wanted to be a good husband, couldn't say it out loud. So he just nodded. I packed quietly. Every sound, the closing of a drawer, the folding of a dress, felt heavier than it should. When I reached the door, I turned to look at him one last time. He was standing in the hallway, his eyes glassy but dry. "Take care of yourself, son," I said. "You too, Mom," he whispered. And then I left. That's how it all began, the day my son chose his wife over me. But life, as I would learn, isn't always as cruel as it first appears. Sometimes love has to lose its way before it finds home again. The first few days after I left Daniel's house felt strangely quiet. My small apartment near the edge of town wasn't much, one bedroom, an old kitchen, and a window that overlooked a row of maple trees, but it was peaceful. I told myself peace was what I needed. In the mornings, I made tea and watched the light filter through the curtains. Sometimes I imagined hearing Daniel's voice in the hallway or his laugh echoing from the living room. But it was only my memory, playing tricks to fill the silence. At first, Daniel called every evening. He'd ask, "Mom, are you okay? Do you need anything?" And I'd say, "I'm fine, sweetheart. Don't worry about me." I meant it. Or at least, I wanted to mean it. But after a few weeks, the calls became less frequent. Once a day turned into once a week. And then sometimes, not at all. When I called him, Emily usually answered. "Hi, Mrs. Collins," she'd say politely, never Mom. I didn't mind that. I just wanted to hear Daniel's voice. "He's a little busy right now," she'd say. "Can he call you later?" I'd reply, "Of course, dear. Tell him I said hello." But later often never came. One evening, I decided to bake an apple pie, Daniel's favorite. It had been his favorite since he was 5. Every birthday, every Christmas, every time he was sick, that pie was there. I wrapped it carefully and took the bus to his house. It wasn't far, just 2 stops away, but the ride felt long. I stood at their door, holding the warm pie in my hands, smiling nervously like a guest at her own home. When Emily opened the door, her expression froze for a moment. "Oh. Mrs. Collins," she said, forcing a smile. "We weren't expecting you." "I know," I replied softly. "I was just baking, and I thought Daniel might like some pie." She hesitated. "He's actually not home yet. Maybe you could leave it? I'll tell him you stopped by." Her words were kind, but her tone wasn't. It was a tone that said you shouldn't have come. I smiled anyway and handed her the pie. "Of course. I didn't mean to intrude." As I turned to leave, Daniel's car pulled into the driveway. For a moment, my heart leapt. He stepped out, holding a grocery bag, and when he saw me, surprise crossed his face. "Mom," he said, setting the bag down. "What are you doing here?" "I brought you some pie," I said, my smile trembling. He looked from me to Emily, then back at me. I could see the tension in his shoulders. "That's so nice of you," he said quickly. "Thank you." Emily stood by the door, her arms crossed loosely, her eyes downcast. I wanted to stay a little longer, to talk, to share tea, to laugh like before. But I knew I couldn't. So I just nodded, whispered, "Take care, son," and walked away. From the car window, I saw him watching me. He didn't come after me, and I didn't expect him to. But in that silent moment, something inside me began to break, quietly, like glass under cloth. Days turned into weeks, and I tried to fill the emptiness with small routines. I tended my plants, visited the library, sometimes volunteered at the church kitchen. People said I looked well, but they didn't know the ache that lived behind my smiles. Every night before bed, I'd whisper a little prayer. "Keep him safe, Lord. Even if I never see him again, keep him safe." I wasn't angry. Just lonely. Then one morning, as I was watering the plants, I noticed the calendar. It was Daniel's birthday. My heart fluttered like it used to when he was a child, when I'd decorate the living room with paper ribbons and bake his favorite pie. I decided to call him. When he picked up, his voice was hurried. "Hey, Mom. Sorry, can I call you later? We're about to have dinner with Emily's parents." "Oh, of course," I said. "I just wanted to wish you." But he'd already hung up. I stood there for a long time, holding the phone, staring at my reflection in the window. My own face looked back at me, older than I remembered, smaller somehow. That evening, I lit a candle and whispered, "Happy birthday, my dear." The flame flickered softly, as if it were answering me. Months passed like that, quietly, uneventfully. Sometimes Daniel visited, but only for a few minutes. Emily rarely came. They always seemed to be in a hurry. Once, he brought me a box of groceries. "You shouldn't be alone so much," he said kindly. I smiled. "I'm fine, Daniel. I've been alone before." He nodded, but I could see he didn't really understand. He was trying to be a good son, I could tell. But love divided is never the same as love shared. Still, I never blamed Emily. She was young, adjusting to marriage, trying to find her own rhythm. Maybe my presence reminded her of responsibilities she wasn't ready for. Maybe she wanted her own space, something I had once wanted too when I first married Peter. I understood her, even if she never knew it. One rainy afternoon, I received a letter. It was from an old neighbor who still lived near Daniel. "Margaret," it read, "I saw Daniel and Emily last week. You'd be proud, he's doing so well at work. They mentioned they're moving to a new house in the suburbs. It's beautiful. You should visit." I smiled faintly, then reread that line, "They're moving." No one had told me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about that new house. Would there be a room for me? A guest bed? A small chair by the window? Or maybe not. Maybe that was the point. A few days later, Daniel called. "Mom," he said, "we're moving next month. It's a bit farther away, but we'll visit when we can." I tried to sound cheerful. "That's wonderful, dear. I'm so happy for you." "Thanks," he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "Emily loves the place." After we hung up, I sat in silence for a long time. I thought of the little boy who once promised, "I'll never forget you, Mom." And I realized that forgetting doesn't always happen on purpose. Sometimes, life just pulls people apart quietly, without anyone meaning for it to. One evening, as the first snow began to fall, I went through Daniel's old things, his school drawings, his baseball glove, his letters from college. I placed them neatly in a box and tied it with a ribbon. "I'll give it to him someday," I whispered. "When the time is right." I didn't know when that time would be. But in my heart, I believed it would come. Because love, real love, never disappears. It only waits, patiently, like a light in the window that never goes out. Winter lingered that year longer than usual. The cold seemed to settle not just in the air, but inside me. I moved through my days quietly, tea, knitting, the radio humming somewhere in the background, trying not to let the emptiness grow louder than it already was. Then one Sunday morning the phone rang. I almost didn't answer, it had been weeks since Daniel last called. "Mom," his voice came through, softer than I remembered, "how are you?" "I'm good, sweetheart. How's the new house?" "It's nice," he said. "A bit busy. Boxes everywhere." He paused, and for a moment all I could hear was the faint hum of the city behind him. "Listen," he continued, "we're having a small housewarming next week. Emily's parents will be there, and some friends. I'd love for you to come." My heart lifted. "I'd love that, Daniel." For days I prepared. I bought a simple dress, pressed it neatly, and baked the same apple pie I'd made since he was little. I even wrapped a small gift, a framed photo of the three of us at his wedding. I hoped it would remind them of love, of beginnings. The house was beautiful, modern, bright, everything new. Emily opened the door wearing a pale blue dress. Her smile was polite but careful. "Mrs. Collins. Come in." I stepped inside, clutching my pie. Laughter floated from the living room where people chatted, glasses clinked. Daniel came forward and hugged me quickly, as if we were in the middle of traffic and the light was about to turn red. "Mom, I'm so glad you came. He meant it, I could tell, but there was something strained behind his eyes. I sat quietly at the edge of the sofa while he moved around greeting guests. No one paid much attention to me, which was fine. I watched him, proud and sad all at once. He looked happy, successful, surrounded by friends. That should have been enough for any mother. Then I heard Emily say, laughing to one of her friends, "Oh, Daniel and I barely have time to ourselves lately. His mom is always checking in, she worries too much." They laughed lightly. It wasn't cruel, just careless. But it cut deep. I looked down at my hands, pretending to fix the edge of my napkin. That small comment seemed to echo every other silence between us. When the evening ended, I waited by the door while guests left. Daniel was busy cleaning up, Emily collecting dishes. I placed the framed photo on the console table. "This is for you both," I said softly. Emily smiled, distracted. "Thank you, that's sweet." No hug, no warmth. Just politeness. I walked out into the cold night alone. Snow had started falling again, soft, slow flakes that melted on my cheeks. I thought of Peter then, of how he used to hold my hand whenever I felt small. "People forget," he once told me, "but love remembers." That night I whispered, "Please, let him remember." Weeks passed. I didn't hear from Daniel. Then, one afternoon, the phone rang again, but it wasn't him. It was a hospital. "Mrs. Collins? Your son has been admitted. A minor car accident, nothing life-threatening, but we need a family contact." For a moment my knees gave way. I grabbed my coat and hurried out, the world blurring around me. When I reached the hospital, Daniel was lying in a small room, a bandage around his forehead. Emily was there, pale and shaken. She looked up as I entered. "Oh. Mrs. Collins," she whispered, her voice trembling. I moved to Daniel's side and took his hand. It was warm, solid, alive. Tears slipped down my face before I could stop them. He opened his eyes slowly. "Mom? I'm here," I said. "You're okay, sweetheart. You're okay." He smiled weakly. "Guess I scared you." "You always have," I whispered, trying to smile back. Emily watched us silently, guilt flickering across her face. I could feel her trying to find words, but none came. Later that night, after Daniel was asleep, Emily approached me in the quiet hallway. "Mrs. Collins," she began softly, "thank you for coming so quickly." "Of course," I said. "He's my son." She nodded, looking down. I haven't been fair to you." I didn't speak, I let her continue. "When we first got married, I wanted everything to be perfect, our home, our life. I thought if I controlled every detail, nothing could go wrong. But in trying to make space for myself, I pushed you out. I see now how wrong that was." Her eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry." For a long moment, I said nothing. I just looked at her, the young woman my son loved, the one I had silently blamed for my loneliness. And in that quiet space, my anger dissolved. I placed a hand on her arm. "You love him," I said. "That's what matters. I never wanted to come between you. I just missed my boy." She nodded, crying quietly. "He misses you too. He just doesn't know how to fix it." I smiled gently. "Then maybe we both start small." Daniel was discharged 2 days later. I stayed by his side until he could walk comfortably. One evening, as I helped him pack his things, he said, "Mom, I'm sorry I haven't been around." I looked at him. "You were living your life, Daniel. That's what children are supposed to do." He shook his head. "No, that's not it. I think I was trying so hard to be a good husband that I forgot how to be a good son." I heard what Emily said happened at the hospital. She told me everything. I should have realized how much you were hurting. I reached over and touched his cheek. "You don't have to apologize, dear. We all lose our way sometimes." His eyes filled. "I love you, Mom." "I know," I whispered. I never doubted that. When we arrived back at his house, Emily greeted me with open arms. It felt strange at first, her hugging me, but it was real. "Come inside," she said. "Please, stay for dinner." That night, for the first time in years, we ate together. Laughter sounded different now, softer, honest. Emily asked for my pie recipe. Daniel teased her about burning toast. It felt like coming home, not just for me, but for all of us. Later, as I washed the dishes, Daniel came to stand beside me. "Mom," he said quietly, "would you stay with us for a while? Just until I'm fully recovered?" I looked at him, smiling. "Are you sure Emily's okay with that?" He grinned. "She's the one who suggested it." I laughed, the sound surprising even me. Then how could I say no? That night, lying in the guest room, I listened to the soft hum of the house, their footsteps, a door closing, faint laughter from the living room. For the first time in a long while, it didn't make me feel lonely. It made me feel safe. I realized then that forgiveness isn't a single act. It's a quiet choice you make every day, to love again, even after hurt. I turned off the lamp, whispering into the darkness, "Thank you, Lord, for bringing my son home." Morning sunlight crept gently through the guest room curtains. For a long moment, I just lay there, listening, the clatter of dishes from the kitchen, Emily humming softly, Daniel's faint laughter drifting from the hallway. It was such an ordinary sound. Yet it filled the house with something I hadn't felt in years, peace. I got up and made my way to the kitchen. Emily was cooking pancakes, her hair tied up messily, a little flour on her cheek. When she noticed me, she smiled, a real one this time. "Good morning, Mrs. Collins." Or should I say, "Mom?" I froze for a second, the word mom hanging in the air like a fragile glass ornament. It was small, but it meant everything. I smiled back. "Good morning, dear. Pancakes smell wonderful." She laughed softly. "Daniel says yours are better, but I'm determined to prove him wrong." I chuckled, helping her pour syrup into a small jar. "That's the spirit." Over the next few days, something gentle began to grow between us. It wasn't forced or sudden, just small gestures that carried warmth. Emily would ask for my advice while cooking or laugh at my old stories about Daniel. Daniel, in turn, seemed lighter, happier, like a man who'd found balance again. One afternoon, as we sat on the porch sipping tea, Emily turned to me. Mom," she corrected herself shyly, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Were you ever scared? When Daniel got married, I mean. Of losing him?" I looked out at the yard, where Daniel was fixing a garden light. The sun glowed behind him, outlining his shoulders the same way it used to when he was a boy playing soccer after school. "Yes," I said softly. "Every mother is scared of that. You spend years holding their hand, teaching them to walk, to be brave, to love, and then one day, they walk away. You know they're meant to, but it still hurts." Emily nodded slowly, her eyes glistening. "I guess I was scared too. Of not being enough. Of not being the kind of wife Daniel's mother could love." I reached over and touched her hand. "Love doesn't need perfection, dear. It just needs a chance." We sat in silence after that, two women who had hurt each other without meaning to, now quietly healing in the afternoon sun. That evening, Daniel brought out an old photo album from his childhood. "Look what I found in the attic," he said, placing it on the table. The first page was a picture of him, maybe 6 years old, holding a tiny toy truck, missing one front tooth. Emily laughed. "He looks so serious here." "He was," I said. "He used to line up his toys and call it his garage business." Daniel grinned. "And you were my first customer." We went through every page, birthdays, school trips, that summer when Peter taught him how to fish. Each photo was a small window into moments I thought were long gone. When we reached the last page, Daniel looked at me quietly. "I think Dad would have liked this house." The mention of Peter's name was like a gentle wind through an old door. "Yes," I said, smiling through tears. "He would have told you to fix the gutter before it leaks." Daniel laughed, then grew thoughtful. "I wish he was here. I feel like I'd understand him more now." "You do," I whispered. "Every time you care for someone, every time you forgive, that's him living through you." Emily reached over, taking his hand, and for a second, I saw the man Peter and I had raised, kind, steady, loving. Weeks passed. Daniel's recovery went well, and soon he was back to work. I planned to return home, not because I wanted to leave, but because I felt it was time. The house, once cold and lonely, now seemed less empty. Maybe it wasn't walls or silence that made a home. Maybe it was the heart's readiness to forgive. The night before I was to leave, Daniel knocked on my door. "Come in," I said, folding my clothes into the suitcase. He sat beside me on the bed, silent for a while. "Mom," he said finally, "I don't want you to go." I smiled softly. "Daniel, you have your own life now." "I know," he said, "but I also have space for you in it." I felt tears rising. "That's kind, dear. But I'll be fine. You and Emily are doing so well together." He nodded, then reached into his pocket and handed me something small, a house key. "This is yours," he said. "Not as a guest, but as family. I want you to come whenever you feel like it, no need to call first." For a second, I couldn't speak. I just looked at the key in my hand, a simple silver thing that carried more meaning than any words. "Thank you, my son," I whispered. "You've no idea how much that means." He smiled. "Actually, I think I do." The next morning, Emily hugged me before I left. "Promise you'll visit soon," she said. "I promise. And next time, you'll bake the pie." She laughed. "Deal." Daniel walked me to the car. As I turned to say goodbye, he suddenly said, "Mom, wait." I turned. He hesitated for a moment, then wrapped his arms around me, tight, warm, like the little boy who used to run into my kitchen after school. "I love you," he said. "I'm sorry it took me so long to show it." I rested my head on his shoulder. "It's never too late, Daniel. Love doesn't count the years, only the moments." The drive home felt different this time. The road that once seemed endless now looked familiar, almost comforting. When I reached my small cottage, I opened the curtains wide and let the light in. On the table, I placed the photo I'd given them, the three of us at the wedding, and beside it, the house key. For a long time, I stood there smiling. Maybe this was what healing looked like, not fireworks, not dramatic apologies, but small, steady warmth returning to the heart. That night, I made myself a cup of tea and stepped outside. The stars were bright, the same ones that had watched over me through every sleepless night. I looked up and whispered, "He came back, Peter. Our boy came home." And for the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't alone. The wind carried a faint scent of apple pie from my kitchen window. I closed my eyes, smiling. Some stories don't end with goodbye. They end with finally understanding why love never really leaves. It's been a few months since that visit, and the house feels different now. Not because it's filled with people, but because it's finally filled with peace. Every morning, I open the curtains and let the sunlight touch the wooden floor. I water the little plants on my windowsill, the same ones Daniel gave me years ago before he left for college. They had withered once, but somehow they've come back to life. Sometimes, I think healing is a lot like that, quiet, patient, and often unnoticed until one day you realize the leaves have turned green again. I spend my days writing in my old journal. I write about little things, the smell of rain, the taste of apple pie, the sound of my son's laughter. There was a time when I wrote to fill the silence. Now, I write to remember gratitude. Every week, Daniel calls. Sometimes Emily joins too. "Mom, we made your chicken soup today," he'll say. Or, "Emily says her pie still doesn't taste like yours." I laugh and tell them my secret ingredient, a little patience, a little love. It's strange how life circles back. The very house that once echoed with loneliness now echoes with laughter, even if it's just through a phone call. One Sunday afternoon, Daniel and Emily drove down to see me. They brought flowers, groceries, and a new photo frame. When they left that evening, I stood by the window, watching their car disappear down the road. And I felt something I hadn't felt in years, complete. It wasn't because everything was perfect again. It was because I had finally let go of the hurt. Forgiveness doesn't erase the past, it simply lets you hold it without pain. That's what I've learned. Sometimes I still remember that night, the one when Emily told me, "Maybe you should stay somewhere else for a while." Back then, those words broke me. Now, when I look back, I see something else. I see a young woman, scared and insecure, trying to find her place in a new family. And I see a mother, me, holding on to the only thing she knew how to love, her son. Two women, both learning what love truly means. Love isn't about winning a place in someone's life. It's about making space, even when it hurts. There was a time when I believed a mother's love was about holding on. Now I understand it's also about letting go, not because you stop caring, but because you trust that what you've taught, what you've given, will live on in them. A mother doesn't disappear when her child grows up. She simply moves into the quiet spaces, in his smile, his kindness, his way of saying thank you even when it's hard. And that's enough. I sometimes walk through Daniel's old room. The shelves are still lined with his books, his old soccer trophy, and the photo of us from his first day of school. I touch the frame and whisper, "We did all right, didn't we?" There's no bitterness left, only gratitude, for every meal shared, every tear shed, every memory that stitched our hearts together again. If I've learned anything, it's this. Family isn't about perfection. It's about presence. We all stumble. We all hurt the people we love. But love, real love, has this quiet way of waiting at the door, even after it's been closed. That's what happened with Daniel. And that's what I hope every mother, every child, every family remembers. No matter how far apart you drift, love always remembers the way home. Sometimes at night, I make an extra cup of tea and place it across from me at the kitchen table, the way I used to when Daniel was a teenager, coming home late from school. I sit there quietly, sip my tea, and imagine him walking through the door. And though I know he's not really there, I can almost hear his voice. "Mom, you're still awake?" I smile and whisper back, "Always, my son." Because a mother's heart never truly sleeps. It just learns to rest between moments of love. A few weeks ago, Daniel called with news. "Mom," he said, excitement in his voice, "you're going to be a grandma." I laughed through the tears. "Oh, Daniel, that's wonderful. I'm so proud of you both." After the call ended, I sat there for a while, letting the words sink in. A grandmother. A new chapter. For a second, I couldn't speak. Then tears filled my eyes. Really? Yes. Emily's 3 months along. And suddenly, I understood, this is how life heals itself. Love doesn't stay still, it grows, changes, finds new forms. The day my son chose his wife over me, I thought I had lost everything. But in truth, it was just the beginning of another lesson, one I had to live to understand. Because sometimes, life takes things away just to show you what's truly yours. I didn't lose my son. I just had to meet the man he was becoming. And through that journey, I found a new part of myself, the woman who can love quietly, forgive freely, and still believe in family after all the pain. When I look back now, I don't see the moment he walked away. I see the moment he came back, eyes full of regret, heart open, hands trembling with apology. And I see myself, standing there, ready to forgive, not because I had forgotten, but because I had remembered what love is supposed to be. Love doesn't need to be perfect to be real. It just needs to come back home. So tonight, before I go to bed, I'll write one last line in my journal. The day my son chose his wife over me was the day I learned love can return, not as it was, but as it was always meant to be. And I'll close the book, smile softly, and whisper into the quiet house. Good night, Daniel. Good night, Emily. Thank you for coming back. Then I'll turn off the light, knowing that the story isn't about what I lost, but about what I found again. Peace,